Taxand Tax Updates. Disclaimer. The following information is intended only to be a guide. It must not be relied on in or applied to specific situations without previously seeking proper professional advice.
Tips for responding to requests for explanation of data and/or information, or the SP2DK from the Tax Office. SP2DK is a letter issued by the head of the Tax Office, or KPP, to the taxpayer, or WP, in the context of implementing a request for an explanation on data and/or information. The purpose of the KPP in issuing an SP2DK is for the implementation of supervision over taxpayers in their fulfillment of tax obligations that have not been fulfilled in accordance with applicable tax provisions. The KPP may send an SP2DK to the taxpayer via fax or facsimile, postal, courier, or expedition services with a letter delivery receipt, direct delivery to the taxpayer through a visit or upon the taxpayer's arrival at the KPP, and/or electronic delivery through the taxpayer's online DGT account. Hence, should a taxpayer receive an SP2DK, there is no need to panic. Simply take note of the following points. 1. Identify the contents and points of requests from the SP2DK. If the taxpayer receives an SP2DK, but the request is unclear or incomprehensible because the details or equalization referred to by the KPP are unknown, including data and/or information from agencies, institutions, associations, or other parties, and exchange of information data, then the taxpayer should submit a letter to the KPP and/or communicate with the account representative to request for the details regarding this matter. There is a possibility that the data presented in the SP2DK contains inaccuracies or human errors due to the data originating from a third party. 2. Pay attention to the time frame for the response submission. Whereas the taxpayer is given the opportunity to submit an explanation by no later than 14 calendar days from the date the SP2DK was sent via facsimile, postal, courier, or expedition services with proof of delivery receipt, or the date of direct delivery of the SP2DK to the taxpayer. Furthermore, the taxpayer may submit explanations more than once, but it is still important to take note of the deadline for the submission of explanation, as indicated in the SP2DK. If the taxpayer does not submit a response, the KPP may conduct a visit or may propose a verification, audit, or examination of preliminary evidence in accordance with the applicable tax provisions. 3. Check the taxpayer's data by preparing supporting documents. After examining the points in the SP2DK, the taxpayer needs to check the taxpayer's internal data and/or documents to discover whether there are errors in the calculation of the taxes payable and/or tax returns submitted, or errors on the KPP side, including the interpretation of the applicable tax laws and regulations. For example, some checks that may be conducted by the corporate taxpayers are, amongst others, ensuring that the monthly tax returns reporting is in accordance with the withholding or collection tax objects in financial statements by preparing a reconciliation or equalization with the withholding or collection tax objects, as well as ensuring the completeness of the attachments required in the annual tax returns. 4. Prepare responses or written explanations along with their supporting documents. If there is an error in calculating the tax payable and/or reporting of the tax returns, the taxpayer must submit the revised calculation of the tax payable along with the tax returns to be corrected. In the event that the taxpayer submits a response disputing the correctness of the data in the SP2DK, the taxpayer must include evidence and/or supporting documents as an attachment to the response, along with the relevant tax regulations as a reference. Number 5. Conduct discussions. The head of the KPP will issue a discussion invitation letter to the taxpayer, from which the results of the discussion will be included in the minutes of discussion. Number 6. Confirm the request for explanation of data and/or information report, or the LHP2DK. Based on the P2DK process that has been carried out, the AR and/or the section head of supervision will make a conclusion, which will be set forth in the preparation of the LHP2DK. Thus, if the taxpayer provides explanations and supporting documents that are deemed convincing and acceptable during the previous discussion processes, the conclusions will result to have no indications and modes of non-compliance found, or will state that the taxpayer has submitted explanations that are in accordance with the results of the investigation and/or are willing to revise the tax returns according to the investigation result. Based on these conclusions, the follow-up recommendations will result to be as follows. The declaration of P2DK activities to have been completed through the issuance of a P2DK Implementation Progress Notification Letter, or SP3, or the supervision of the submission or revision of the tax returns. In contrary, if during the discussion process, the taxpayer submits an explanation that does not match the results of the investigation and/or is not willing to revise the tax returns according to the investigation results, the head of supervision will recommend an audit on the taxpayer. Number 7. Follow up with the taxpayer regarding the commitment to pay the tax and/or revise the tax returns. The taxpayer will be given a maximum period of 30 calendar days from the date of completion of the LHP2DK to revise the tax returns. If the taxpayer submits the tax return revision in accordance with the LHP2DK within that time period, an SP3P2DK will then be issued. On the other hand, if the taxpayer does not submit the tax return revision according to the LHP2DK within that time period, then it can be followed up with a recommendation for an audit process.
Thank you for listening to PB Taxand Tax Updates.